Hello, I'm Wale Ogunleye, Head of Sports and Entertainment at UBS. It's an honor to have with me here today 8-time Grammy Award winner, bassist, composer, and artistic director for Jazz House Kids and the Newport Jazz Festival, Christian McBride. Christian has been in the music industry since he was 8 years old and quickly became an overnight success after being discovered at Juilliard by saxophonist Bobby Watson. Since then, he's had a front row seat at watching the evolution of music throughout his career. He has worked with scores of amazing artists that span generations, from the great James Brown to Renee Fleming to Sting and to one of my favorite current stars, Billie Eilish. Through his life experiences, we're going to understand from one of the biggest jazz legends what struggles a young artist faces, the importance of financial literacy, and creating a legacy that truly matters. Christian, welcome, and thank you for being here today.
It is an honor to speak with you. I'm a big fan.
Oh man, I'm a bigger fan.
You know, the only thing I ever wanted to do other than music was play pro football.
Really?
Yes.
How'd that go? Though? No, actually, you know what's so crazy about it is, athletes at the end of the day, they always want to be musicians.
Yeah.
And I see like musicians want to do the athlete side, but I wish I could do what you do. Let's dive in, if you don't mind.
Do it.
You've been in the industry for decades, right? And I'm sure there's some lessons that you learned throughout your time in music. Can you talk about, though, your relationship through money and why is it important for young artists to be educated on the pitfalls and some of the glory of having a lot of money early on?
You know, it really makes such a difference to have. See, I had musical mentors in my life. I had a lot of musicians that showed me a lot of the ins and outs of how to play this music. But I never really had a lot of mentors to show me what to do with the money that you make when you play music. And I find that in life, you really learn the most from your mistakes. Right. It's just a matter of being able to recover from those mistakes and not make the same mistake ever again. Right. When I think of my 20s, I think of me wasting a lot of money on starter jackets, sneakers, instruments that I didn't even really play them all that much. I had a whole apartment full of electric basses. And the reason why is because, number one, I didn't have a band. So I was not responsible for paying anybody. All the money that was coming in was mine, And I remember in 1996, I went on my first tour with Chick Corea. I had been on the road with Pat Metheny and Joshua Redman, 93 and 94. And so I had really, I was making some good money. And it was coming in. It was continuing to come in. So my first thought was, I don't see this drying up anytime soon. I'm going to be fine. And then in 1996, I went on my first tour with Chick Corea, and I made more money than I had made with Pat Metheny and Joshua Redman. And so I thought, I should move. It's time to get a new apartment. I should move on up. I was living on 27th and Lexington, and I moved up to East 96th Street, Normandy Court. I lived in the building up there. And my rent literally tripled and went from $1,100 a month to $3,300 a month. The thought never occurred to me, this tour with Chick is going to end at some point.
Yeah, crazy.
And when that tour ends, what you going to do? So when that tour ended, I had like a little bit of money put away, like maybe for 2-3 months. But then after those 2 or 3 months, I said, uh-oh. Now I'm in hustle mode again. I felt like a college freshman all over again. And I started buying all these books, New York Times, how to save money, how to invest. And I also made some bad mistakes because I hired an accountant who wasn't really an accountant,
Was it a friend of a friend, or was it, he was in that inner circle?
He was a financial manager, but not an accountant, And a couple of wrong forms got filed, and I paid for it. So I got out of my 20s, fortunately, a lot of bruises, a lot of nicks, a lot of cuts, but I was able to recover.
Got it.
So I would say to these young people coming up in the music world, please get someone to be your financial mentor as well, because the talk is always, oh, you're a jazz artist, you're not going to make any money. You might not make any big money, but you will make steady money. And I think that's more important than anything else.
No, I totally agree with you. I think for me, even when I had got undrafted, I was undrafted free agent with the Miami Dolphins, and my salary at the time was like, I don't know, almost $200,000. Still, I was telling people like, yeah, it's not millions, but it's still making more than the person who graduated summa cum laude at my school, right? So it's a good amount of money, but having that background of having someone helping you, walk you through the process, develop a plan to help you save is crucial in the industry.
So crucial.
Oh, so crucial. and then not everyone has that time to rebound or have a career that you can make those mistakes. So it's really imperative that athletes and entertainers get their ducks in a row early. Yeah. Really is.
I remember, I look back on this now, and a friend of mine said, you know, you're renting apartments. Why don't you buy something? And my first thought was, you know, I could never afford buying an apartment in Manhattan, you know. And this was in 1990. So around the same time I went on tour with Chick Corea. I lost my mind going on tour with Chick Corea. And I said, man, I can't afford buying an apartment in Manhattan. So I looked at a couple of places with the intent to buy. And the prices at that time probably weren't that bad. But the thought of, you know, getting a first-time homeowner's loan, that never even came across my radar, you know. So many things like basic financial info I didn't know. You know, I could have owned an apartment in Manhattan, you know.
Man, what would that be right now? What would that be worth right now?
I'll tell you what, I am happy with the house that my wife and I own now. So it worked out. But I think, man, had I bought an apartment in Manhattan in 1996, oh, man.
Yeah, I tell that to my parents all the time, like, man, Mom, if we could have got one of them brownstones.
You know?
Yeah, but hindsight is 20/20.
Hindsight is 20/20.
Hindsight is 20/20. You've been around, again, we talked about this. I hate to keep saying like for decades because it makes you seem like you're an old man, but you're not. You've seen the change in the music industry, right? When it was vinyl.
Yes.
Went from vinyl to CDs, which my kids think are coasters, right? They look at coasters now. To now to streaming.
Right.
And because of that, you're seeing artists look at selling their music rights. I'm looking at news articles where these big publishing deals are being made.
Yeah.
What do you think about for an artist that's thinking about or hoping to make the most of their image and the music that they make? What do you think about this current stage of music?
Well, in my world, which is primarily the jazz world, even if you're not a jazz musician, I mean, like in terms of income from streaming, jazz artists and classical musicians are probably at the smallest piece of the pie, because you don't really find a lot of jazz songs that are going to get, you know, 40 million streams. You know, we're not, you know, no jazz artist is ever going to get the same amount of numbers as a Taylor Swift or a Lana Del Rey or somebody like that. So when you see these people selling their catalogs, kind of makes sense for them.
Right.
But as a jazz artist, I feel that we have gone back to square one, which I actually don't think is a bad thing. And you see a lot of musicians investing in their careers with merchandise, selling hard product at the show, and that way they take home 100% profit, you know. But in terms of selling your catalog, unless you have a catalog of songs that have become hits, which sadly hasn't happened in jazz probably since the early 70s, you're going to have to go back to square one and DIY, you know, which like I said, I don't think that's a bad thing.
Even for, how about even a regular, and that's not just the jazz, but shouldn't that be an approach for most artists to maximize?
Yes, I
that
believe
DIY,
so.
yeah, it should be,
I
right?
feel that there are a lot of musicians who put way too much focus and emphasis on what, quote unquote, the company should be doing. They should be doing this for me. Well, okay, maybe they should be, but you still should be doing this for yourself.
Right,
You know,
I get it.
and that's one of the things I learned studying James Brown's career. You know, that man, he was DIY all the time.
All the time, all the time. Yeah, my dad, you know, my dad's Nigerian, and he said that, you know, James Brown would come to Africa and just, in his private jet coming in, and it was like a black man just doing it like this, and it was a shock to everybody.
Yes.
And it's great to hear that was one of the people that you've looked to and saw how amazing he was. You had some good examples in your life, some really great good stuff. And speaking about James, I want to dive into this one big, because for me, being in my role as the head of sports entertainment at UBS, there's a part of, I think, the way the financial industry looks at artists and misses this part of what a true legacy means, right? And building a true legacy. I think those 1-2 years where you're making a ton of money, then, you know, a little bit after where you want to buy a house and, you know, build a family. But having that generational wealth is where I think the financial industry has missed the mark. And it's something that we want to focus on here at UBS. But for you, what does a legacy actually mean?
I think for me, a legacy specifically means, since I don't have children of my own, my legacy is with the musicians that come through Jazz House Kids, the musicians who have come through my bands, and the musicians who will soon be responsible for uplifting and giving opportunities to the younger musicians that are coming up. Because I feel like in our world, the jazz community, there have been a lot of great mentors, like what we call, you know, finishing schools for jazz musicians. People like Art Blakey, the late great Betty Carter. They invested so much time and effort building up the younger generation so they can become leaders one day. So that's kind of where I see my legacy, trying to build up a generation, continue to build up generations of leaders.
Let's, you know, and in closing, I want to ask you this last question. I think it's something that, to me, really touched my heart. The movement revisited.
Oh, thank you.
Can you please explain a little bit about the major civil rights figures that are in, and just people that are in this, that meant so much to you in this piece, from Martin Luther King and Malcolm X, Rosa Parks. Like, talk about that.
Well, in 1998, I was commissioned to write a long-form piece of music for this program in Portland, Maine. And when I was trying to figure out what I was going to compose, I had a lot of options. You know, they left it up to me. They said, whatever theme you want, you know, just, you know, you have the creative choice to do whatever you want. So I picked Rosa Parks, Malcolm X, Muhammad Ali, and Dr. Martin Luther King, because as a kid, I read a lot about Black history. And there are a lot of great people who put their lives on the line for civil rights, human rights, equal rights, everything across the board, getting laws passed, getting laws changed, men, women, and so there are a lot of people you can write about, but those were 4 people that really touched me deeply. So I tried to make a sonic portrait of each person. Like, what do I hear? Like, when I think of their story, how would that translate into music? And so I went and did a lot of study, a lot of research, and I took choice quotes from each person, and I wrote music to those, around those quotes.
So you did it for you. I get, but as you're making music, you made it for you, but obviously you want us to hear it and to get it. what do you think the youth should get from that?
Well, I hope that whoever hears this piece of music, no matter what their age is, that they become curious enough to go do their own research. You know, they might hear Sister Rosa, that's the piece from the movement Revisited dedicated to Rosa Parks. They might hear Sister Rosa and go, you know, I don't know that much about Rosa Parks. Let me go do some research. I've never heard that particular Malcolm X quote before. Let me go find out where that comes from. So it's curiosity that I hope people have when they hear this piece.
Love it. Listen, I think at the end of the day, and especially in today's culture, it takes courage to push back against the people that don't want to hear what true history was and the struggles that our people had to go through. So
That's right.
I commend you on that. So thank you so much.
My pleasure. Thank you.
And in closing, I asked you earlier, I think it was a trick question about what your legacy is going to be, Christian. You are already a legend. And I want to thank you so much for what you mean, not just to artists, but to young black men like myself and to people in the community that look up to you and are grateful for all the things that you do for us. So thank you for joining us here at UBS.
It was an honor to speak with you.
Hopefully we'll see you again down
Let's
the road.
talk. Can we talk some football off the
We can.
off the record? Okay.
Listen, we're excited to see what you got next, but we'll talk a little bit of football. So thank you. You got a lot in store, I'm sure.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, brother.
All right.